Now, we've had the most clicked stories on Sky News. Now the story's moving up across the internet. Joining me tonight is Joel Veitch of the cult site rathergood.com. Joel, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Let's have a look at the first one. Have we seen the end of female lead characters in movies?
Well, this is remarkable, isn't it? This is Warner's saying that they're not going to have female leads in movies anymore. I think really this is a classic case of getting confused between bad script writing and women being a problem in the films. I really don't think it's realistic to say that we will never have a female lead in a movie again. I think what's happened is there have been a couple of films which bombed because they weren't actually very good films that happened to have female leads in them.
Yeah, not necessarily due to the ladies, is it? Bring them back. Right, scientists have finally worked out what an appendix is for.
They have, and it's all about good bacteria. It turns out when you get a terrible bout of diarrhea that flushes away all of the nasty stuff in your insides, it can take all the good stuff away too. And as we all know, you need good bacteria in your gut, and they hide out in the appendix. And then so when you're well again, you can recolonise your gut with good bacteria from the appendix before all the nasties get in there and take over, and that's what it's for.
And for those of us who haven't got an appendix anymore?
It's okay, because you live in a civilised and you live in a country with good healthcare, I should say. Very serious diarrhea is endemic in the third world and in places without good hygiene. Over here, it doesn't really matter because you don't get that kind of catastrophic diarrhea anymore.
Tell me about this art attack on a French museum.
Well, that's just crazy, isn't it? I have, as most people have, I think, had a drink too many and done something silly in the past. But breaking into the Musée d'Orsay and putting my fist through a Monet is not something that's ever occurred to me. It's pretty high on the list of drunken vandalism, isn't it? Amazing that they got in, frankly. These are drunkards who got in through the door and punched a painting. A priceless painting. It's crazy.
And I bet they didn't understand when people explained what they'd done either.
No.
Not until they sobered up. Anyway, has an inventor managed to beat the speed cameras? How have they done it?
Well, here's an interesting one. This is a guy, Boffin, I love the word Boffin, who's modified his mobile phone so that it can track his average speed as he goes along using GPS. Where he falls down is that it tracks the average speed, and I think the law is that if you go over 30 miles an hour in a 30 zone, you're breaking the law. All he can prove with his camera is that his average speed is below 30. He was snapped by a camera. It was supposed to go to court for reasons to do with the judge not being able to show up or something along those lines. Anyway, the case was dropped for technical reasons, and now he claims a moral victory. I personally doubt whether actually there's a future in this device. I
don't think so. Now, are we on the verge of artificial life? There's a question.
Well, that is an interesting question, isn't it? This is Craig Venter, who you could describe him as controversial. I mean, he's caused an enormous amount of controversy in the Human Genome Project. He says that he's on the verge of creating artificial life by taking a chromosome constructed in a lab, putting it into a cell, and that chromosome should take over the cell. It's not making a full-blown organism from scratch. It's making a chromosome which will take over a pre-existing organism, that cell. I think actually his publicity guys are now backtracking a little bit from the story, which originally said it was happening right now. I'm not sure they've actually
Nice headline, not quite right, okay? Tell us about this one. Google want to break into the mobile phone market. That's been rumoured for a long time. What's the latest twist on this?
Well, depending on your point of view, Google either trying to take over the world or fighting a plucky resistance against Microsoft. It's not about them making a phone as such, it's about them making software which will run on phones. At the moment, Microsoft obviously kind of dominate the market in operating systems on phones. Google want to have an open source system which will work on your mobile phone. Maybe it will work. I mean, MFs are going to be difficult to beat because obviously they're monolithic and control the market, but maybe it'll be a great thing.
And Lincolnshire bakers you've got, all hot and bothered.
Yes.
Well, that goes with the territory.
It does, doesn't it? This is Lincolnshire plum bread. Much in the same way as if you buy champagne, it has to be from Champagne, or a Melton Mowbray pork pie, it has to be from Melton Mowbray. People who make plum bread in Lincolnshire are saying that people who make plum bread which is no good and not made by them, giving them a bad name. So Lincolnshire plum bread, latest on the list of traditional foods which we should be fighting for.
Okay, we'll see you again in just a moment.
Cheers.
With other topic we're going to talk about, but thank you for the moment. On the website, don't forget you can click this button to watch live online, and for all the links to the stories we've mentioned on sky.com news. Coming up, the most popular web video, including doing the mambo in jail. Prisoners in the Philippines show us their moves. Plus, for those who are watching this programme online, a news quiz during this commercial break. Now, that was the most clicked. Next, the stories most debated online today, and one of the most discussed stories is whether Britain is too emotionally sensitive for a film about a missing girl. Now, Ben Affleck's film, Gone Baby Gone, has been delayed in its release in the UK because of the similarities to the Madeleine McCann case. He said it was the right decision.
You have investigated an abduction before?
I think Mr.
Disney thought they would err on the side of good taste and postpone it a bit until it came to it at least calmed down a little bit, so it seemed more appropriate. The timing seemed more appropriate, and I really thought that was a really good thing.
Well, our guest tonight, Joel Veitch, has been looking at the online debate surrounding it. Is this getting hypersensitive, taking sensitivity too far?
I think it would be difficult to say it was hypersensitivity. Obviously, this is a case which has, tugged an awful lot of heartstrings around the country and around Europe as a whole. Having a look at the synopsis of the film, obviously I haven't seen the film because it hasn't been released, but it is about a small girl being abducted. Having said that, afterwards the film does seem to involve a lot of people running around with guns in America, and Morgan Freeman being a hard-bidden cop. So it's not as if the story is exactly parallel, but
No.
still, obviously a lot of people are very sensitive about this case at the moment, and it just makes sense, really, I suppose, to delay the release.
And I suppose there's just another thing for the McCann family to think about. They've had a whole load of storylines today to have to deal with, and comments to be made on. We heard this from the McCann family official spokesman.
We thank him for being thoughtful enough and sensitive enough to Jerry and Kate's position to make such a commercial decision. Obviously, we would hope that Madeleine will be found very soon to enable Kate and Jerry to move on, but also to enable him and that movie to go ahead in due course. But they certainly would thank him for his sensitivity that he's shown so far. If
we aggregate all the hits we get on the McCann story, it is just phenomenal. Do you understand that? Why it's so big?
Well, I mean, as a parent of a young child, only 6 months, obviously much smaller, but I do understand. It's just your worst nightmare, isn't it, to have your child taken away? I think probably before I had my child, I wouldn't have understood in quite the same way. It is just a remarkable story on so many levels, isn't it? And I don't think it's in any way surprising that people have such an enormous amount of interest in it, really. It is something that every parent can just look at that and think, oh my God, what an awful thing to happen.
You see, some of the bloggers are saying it is an overreaction and it's a completely unnecessary move, and maybe it's just a bit of other publicity for Ben Affleck. I mean, they can't have it every which way, can they, these actors?
Well, I can see why people are taking that stance, and obviously, that is a point that's there to be made. I don't think I necessarily agree with it myself. I'm sure that there is a certain amount of concern about bad reaction in the press and among the public to the film if they were to release it now, and that must have something to do with it as well. But I mean, it does just seem like they've obviously made a decision which may have been commercially driven, but seems to be certainly very sensible in terms of the public mood.
Okay, protecting appropriate or inappropriate, you think, in this case? I mean, it's going to be released sooner or later, that's the point, isn't it? Or it'll get released on DVD and people watch it then?
Oh, I'm sure it'll get a cinematic release. They're not talking about ditching the film altogether. There's a huge amount of money being invested in this, as with any big blockbuster film, and it will get released. I think it's, obviously they want it to be released to a positive reaction and not to be overshadowed by a real-world case, which has all these other connotations, which I'm sure they don't want to disrupt their publicity for their film, which is, at the end of the day, a piece of fiction.
Okay. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks.
Let's talk about that other story, which really has been in the headlines.